Hey. Today I think we're going to be reacting to a sketty animation. So let's get right into that. So let me go to YouTube right now. And then, so let me, scary animations. Scotty animations. Scotty animation. 5 more. Okay, I guess we'll be watching this one. But let me open an end screen real quick. So, darn it. Hold on, I'm like looking for this right now.
When I was young, I went to that one house in the town where the residents went all out and probably spent thousands of dollars getting the place perfect for Halloween. Now, this place was insanely well done, and I mean really freaking good. Albeit, even as an adult, it competed with professional haunted houses. I believe the year was either 1999 or 2000 because I went as Darth Maul. I remember being literally scared out of my mind the previous few years, and I hope my badass character would provide me with some sort of courage. They blocked off the scene with a black tarp and had everything you could ever want to see at such a house. A psycho shower scene with a zombie crawling out of a toilet, ghouls and imps climbing the tree, blood, gore, strobes, fog, everything. I remember feeling terrified, even with my double lightsaber. Even though I was scared to death to walk through it, I always admired the workmanship, as I knew that the props they had were either really expensive or took some good effort to make. To this day, I've never seen a better yard than that. As always, every year, I saw the house owners sitting on their porch reveling in the terror they brought to the neighborhood and handing out candy. So, I nervously crossed the yard past flying banshees and impaled corpses. I noticed the main attraction at the end of the line. There, on what I guess was probably the driveway, was the bottomless pit attraction. The illusion bewildered and chilled me, and though it was only lit by the lone light bulb, it made the box glow like a low-burning furnace. I must have stared at it for a while when I suddenly heard a cough and a low hushed voice to my right. I don't really remember what was said, but I want to say it sounded something like, "Hey, check this out," or "Hey, I want to show you something," in a gruff and horsey kind of tone. I looked over and at first saw nothing but the wide gate to what was clearly the side of the owner's house. There was just a faint amount of light from the glowing pit to illuminate the outlines of the gated fence. After adjusting my eyes, I noticed a figure standing completely still. In fact, it was so still, I remember thinking it was just another static prop. My young mind just didn't register a lot of this.
Okay, this is like really weird. But I'll deal with it.
And was still looking for the voice I heard, not realizing it had come from the figure who I could still only be.
Okay, to let you know, there's gonna be an ad in 1 second, so like, hold on, like 1 second, I gotta like put my chair up. Okay, I'm gonna start it back.
Barely make out.
My finger is on the
It's an ad.
Push the button.
That was weird ad.
After a few moments, I heard the voice again. I realized it had come from the figure and began to approach it. This was obviously a stupid idea, but in comparison to everything else that was happening around me, this figure seemed anything but imposing. So I cautiously approached the figure, trying to make sense of it. Suddenly, the figure began to move, and consequently, I froze solid. The light from the amber glow lit up its face just enough for me to make out its features. This I do remember clearly. It was a scraggly and rough-looking man with a coarse grey beard and yellowed teeth. His weathered and tattered clothing looked like it hadn't been cleaned in ages. He was smiling at me, though I had no idea why, but It unsettled me greatly under the hellish glow of the light bulb behind me. It all felt wrong. It was as if at that moment I had acquired some clarity and realised his presence here obviously was not part of the show. And considering I already also saw the owners, he clearly did not belong on the property. I screamed and ran out of there as fast as I could to the exit, not looking behind for a second. I probably got a few looks from the other kids around us, but as soon as I found my parents waiting outside, I told them about the man I saw. I saw one of the owners approach and ask if everything was alright. I said something like, I didn't like the old man by the gate. He looked at me for a second and went, "What man?" I never went back there, ever again. Number 2. Several years ago, right before I was about to leave for trick-or-treating on Halloween, I got into a fight with my mum. I had told her I was going to pick up a friend and go out with that friend, but my mum insisted I had an adult with me. I raged, thinking it would be too embarrassing to have to follow around an adult like a child. I was old enough to look after myself, or at least I thought so. After the episode with my mum, I ran to my room, enraged that she would do that to me. However, instead of obeying her, I devised a plan to get what I wanted. My younger brother and sister were going to go trick-or-treating with my mum and my mum's friend and her son. I decided that I would tell my mum I was sorry for lashing out and that I was going to stay home and pass out candy. Then, after she left with my siblings, I was going to go out like I had planned. I had planned it perfectly too. I knew what time they were going to come back home. I knew what route they were going to take, and I congratulated myself for my cunning plan. After my family left, I got together.
I'm sorry, I'm just blinking like so hard right now because like my eyes are like... Oh no, okay, yeah, let's keep watching.
My costume. I was going as a gangster, which was probably the worst thing I could have done, but I was blinded by my excitement
Toddler chasers.
Another
horse
ad.
wranglers, and multitasking actresses like me.
to realise my mistake. My mind went wild with all the things I could do now that my parents were gone. I could really live. I got so deep into this idea of being on my own that I decided I was going to trick-or-treat on my own and called my friend to tell her I was cancelling. Another huge mistake. I left the house with quite a bit of confidence in myself. The first street I went down went great. I got loads of candy and was having a great time. Once again, my excitement and confidence blinded me from the strange looks I got from being alone. I turned left down another street, my pride building with every step. I was almost at the end of the street, thinking of ways to explain all the candy I'd got to my parents, when I realised I was being followed. By the time I had come to this realisation, I was at the section of the street where it was kind of out in the open, no trees between the sidewalk and the road, and I didn't see any other kids near me. There was a car, and quite a trashy one at that, following a few feet behind me. All my confidence had vanished and my hair stood on end. I glanced behind myself at the car and all the windows were down, and 3 men were in the car, all smoking cigarettes. They were glaring right at me. As soon as I caught their stare, all the warnings my mother had given me about creeps like this hit me in the head. I looked down at my gangster costume and knew I blew it. I looked like a thug. I quickly turned back around and started walking, my heart beating out of my chest. My whole body went numb, and I instantly forgot how to do everything except walk forward. I was at the last house on the street with the car still following close behind, when I made the split decision to turn up the driveway of the last house. Now, the house I turned to was completely abandoned, and had been for years. The windows were boarded up, and the front yard had been scattered in junk. Everyone in the neighbourhood knew that the house was abandoned too. The car stopped right in front of the house, and everyone inside the car was just staring directly at me. I walked up to the front porch and turned around, thanking God for the tall bushes blocking the porch from the street and blocking the creepers' view. I stood there for at least a minute, staring right back at them, knowing I wasn't going to make it. My heart thumped out of my chest, and I could hear it ringing in my ears. One of them got out of the car. He stood and looked directly at me through the bushes and into my soul. I stood holding the rusty doorknob, staring right back at him. We must have stood like that for a long
That is weird. But I'm gonna get right back into it because I don't know. Oh, okay, so I've been watching this for like 10 minutes. Okay, let me get back to it.
10 seconds before the man got back into the car and they peeled down the street. Once they were gone, I ran as fast as I could across the street and up the opposite direction, frantically looking for someone I knew. I spotted my brother's friend and his mother and walked right behind them until they reached my street. I got a few weird looks from my mum, but I really didn't care. I ran up to my house and cried myself to sleep. I still live in the same neighborhood, and every time I pass the abandoned house, I silently thank it for saving my life. I don't know why the creeps didn't come after me, as they likely knew that the house was also abandoned.
This upcoming Halloween will be my 40th birthday, and even after nearly 25 years, the terrifying memory of that night has never faded. You see, I lost my virginity in a pumpkin patch on Halloween. I know, cliche. Specifically, I lost it in the bed of a pickup truck while it was parked in the pumpkin patch. To give you an idea, the patch was maybe 80 by 100 feet, and fenced off by wire mesh to prevent cows from getting in. The truck was parked just inside the only gate. Myself and my date had settled there right before the sun went down. My house was just across the street from the pumpkin patch. We shared a bottle of...
I'm sorry, but y'all gotta be like silent for just a couple minutes. Okay, unsilent.
barking at us.
Okay, you're good.
My date and I paused and drunkenly, playfully, began throwing scraps of food out into the pumpkins for them to chase. After a couple of minutes of that, we continued where we left off. After we were done, we sat there in the truck and looked up at the stars, while the dogs wandered around sniffing random things. After a short while, I saw my father return home, pulling into the driveway across the street. The dogs bounded out of the patch towards him, and me and my date quickly began to dress ourselves. Once we were fully clothed, we just sat on the tailgate and kept talking as we watched my dad pet the dogs and go into the house. It was about then that we heard it. A rustling sound coming from the patch somewhere behind us. We both paused and turned. At this point, there was only moonlight to illuminate our surroundings, but it was enough. And this is exactly what we saw. A single pumpkin began to rise up out of the patch, but not like someone was lifting it. It was kind of sideways, like it had been resting on its side and was now sitting up. For a split second, I thought someone was rising this pumpkin out of the patch on a stick or a metal bar. But then the stick changed position. It coiled like a snake and then shot straight up, like a man would be if he went from a squatting position to a standing position. I then saw two spindly legs with knee joints protruding from the thing, but no arms. There was a buzzing in my ear, and all of a sudden my date screamed. We both jumped off the truck and booked it out of the patch and sprinted.
Cindy Hyde-Smith is rated the least.
I'm gonna silent this so y'all don't have to like deal with it, okay? Plus, this ad is like sort of for older kids like me. I don't know why I get so many ads. Like, I shouldn't be getting ads. Okay, it's done. Y'all can listen again.
House. I glanced back once, and I'll swear on whatever you want me to swear on. A tall, skeletal figure was leaning over the truck where we had both been sitting, and I caught a glimpse of two beady red eyes staring back at me. It made it to my garage and forced our way through the kitchen door. I began screaming at my dad to get his gun. It wasn't until I saw the blood on the kitchen floor that I realized that my nose had been bleeding. Even more alarming, my date's nose was gushing blood as well. I told my dad that there was someone in the pumpkin patch, and he grabbed his gun and power walked out of the house, the dogs following closely behind him. But they stopped halfway there, refusing to come any closer to the pumpkin patch. When my dad returned, he was livid. He wanted to know what had damaged the fence and broke the tailgate off my truck, which technically was his truck. I could only shiver in confusion and abject terror. He reported that something had knocked the tailgate right off the truck and then tore out of the patch from inside and destroyed a huge section of fence. I didn't sleep at all that night. I cowered in terror in the living room with all the lights on. The next day, the police came and examined the scene. The wire fence had been torn out of the ground and dragged a short distance away. There was no clear indication of what specifically had done it. My father and the police were convinced that it was a trespasser pulling a Halloween prank. But I never believed that for a moment. I tried to explain that the dogs had been pounding through the patch minutes before the thing had appeared, and neither of them had made a sound to alert us that there was a trespasser nearby. Furthermore, the entry gate to the patch made plenty of noise whenever the wind rattled it. So if someone climbed over it, it would make even more noise, and we had been sitting right by the gate. Another thing that terrified me is the shape of the thing as it stood. Even if it was a trespasser with an elaborate costume, none of that would even begin to explain the tailgate, the destroyed fence, the nosebleeds, and our dogs being too nervous to approach the patch, or the eyes I had caught a glimpse of. My father went to his grave believing that we had been vandalized by trespassers. My date and I concluded later that whatever it was, it hadn't been human or an animal. I don't tell this story often because I mostly get the same Charlie Brown joke. It was the Great Pumpkin, so no one really takes me seriously. But I've heard that skinwalkers can take the form of anything that best suits their surroundings. Our property wasn't anywhere near a Native American reservation, but I can't think of anything else it could have been. So what do you think it was?
A monster? Wow, they ended the video right there. Huh. But that was weird, but okay. Well, the video's over. Bye. I guess. Comment down below what y'all thought about it. Anyway, bye. Oh.